Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back. This is episode 32 of our series, Muhammad, the Man Who Changed the World. And this is the concluding episode on the Battle of the Trench, or the Battle of the Ahzab. And so in our last episode, we mentioned how this one person, Nu'aym ibn Mas'ud, one of the Ghatafan, wakes up as a believer. He had come with the Ghatafan to invade Medina, and he wakes up with Iman in his heart. He can't explain it. And he goes to the Prophet ﷺ and says, Ya Rasulullah, I'm a Muslim, I want to help you guys. And the Prophet said, great, but you're one person, what are you going to do? And Nu'aym says, don't worry, I've got a plan. And Nu'aym radiallahu anh was able to sow disunity, confusion, mistrust between all the parties of the coalition. And so Abu Sufyan was told not to trust the Jews. The Jews were told not to trust Abu Sufyan. They were told to take prisoners. Abu Sufyan refused to give prisoners over. And it has now gotten to breaking point where it is the absolute last ditch effort. The Ahzab, the coalition, is falling apart, it's fracturing. And Abu Sufyan has to make a decision. Is he going to fight alone? Because the Banu Qurayza are refusing to fight on a Saturday. Part of the Jewish law is that they don't fight on the Sabbath. So Abu Sufyan, it's Friday night. The Jews have basically, in his mind, betrayed him completely. They made a fool out of him. He's so furious that even Huyay, the guy who had brought all of this together, leaves Abu Sufyan's army and goes with the Banu Qurayza. So because the Banu Qurayza had disappointed Abu Sufyan so much, Abu Sufyan, even the Huyay didn't feel safe with Abu Sufyan. But it's still unclear, will he go and will he fight the next day? The Muslims in the meantime, not sure what's about to happen. And the Prophet says, Hudayfa radiallahu anh, on a undercover mission into the belly, into the den of the lion, right into the enemy camp to try and find out. And Hudayfa tells us in the first person that it was a Friday night on the 5th of Shawwal. It was the coldest and darkest night of the year. Perhaps, of course, the mood felt like that as well. It was chilly, the wind was howling. It was, a really miserable evening, and everybody on the Muslim side were quite, terrified. And so Hudayfa goes into the enemy camp and he looks around and he says he sees the wind blowing and tents are being blown over and fire pits are being blown one to the other side. People are covering their faces and horses and camels are being scattered. So it's really also quite difficult on the side of the Quraysh. And he's trying to figure out what's happening. And so he says, I walk and I find myself in a gathering where there's a guy talking, pointing around, and I sit in the gathering because I think, okay, maybe this guy is in charge. And on close inspection, I remember it's dark, he looks and he says, this is Abu Sufyan. Abu Sufyan, so he manages to find himself right in the middle of Abu Sufyan's sort of meeting. And Abu Sufyan is giving out orders. And Hudayfa says in that moment, his first instinct was to obviously take out his arrow and shoot Abu Sufyan. No one would have seen where the arrow comes from. But then he remembered the Prophet ﷺ's command that said, get recon, just go and get information and come back. Don't engage. Don't put yourself at risk. So Hudayfa says, I sat down and I listened. And Abu Sufyan comes closer and he says, guys, I want to tell you, Hudayfa managed to somehow sneak into a very strategic meeting. This is like a senior leadership meeting. And Abu Sufyan says, guys, I can't see who's who here. It's dark, the wind is blowing, everyone's covering their faces. So just check to the person next to you, is it someone that is trustworthy, someone that should be there? Hudayfa is sitting right in the middle, smack in the middle, everyone's around him. And Hudayfa says, I quickly grabbed the man on my right hand side and said, what's your name? And the guy said, I'm whatever, Sulaiman. And he grabs the guy on the left and he says, what's your name? And the guy said, I'm Aziz. And so Hudayfa said, I asked them and no one asked me. And no one suspected me. And so Hudayfa is just kind of blending in amongst the crowd. And Abu Sufyan says, guys, I am here to inform you that it is now confirmed the Jews have betrayed us, the Banu Qurayza has betrayed us, all of this was a sham, we're brought here for nothing, and the storm has now come in. This whole campaign was a disaster. We've been here for more than a month. You can see how things are going. All our tents, our camp is being blown over. I don't know what it is that you guys want to do, but as for me, I'm packing up and I'm leaving. I've had enough of this campaign. I'm going back to Mecca. There's no benefit for me here. And and he obviously felt betrayed, and he felt that the entire thing was orchestrated for some reason, but it was never the intention of the Banu Qurayza or in fact, the Banu Nadir, the Huyay and the Jews to actually fight. In his mind, they brought him and they wanted him to do all the heavy lifting, and he need to pay the price of blood, whereas they were not willing to lift a finger. And so he says, I'm not going to basically fight on their behalf. And so he packs up and he, at that moment, gets on his camel and he leaves, he storms off back to Mecca. And again, Hudayfa says, in that moment, I saw him riding away. I was about to pull out my bow and arrow and shoot him. I mean, he wouldn't have been, he would be he's like a sitting duck. But Hudayfa remembered the command. And again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had preserved Abu Sufyan. Abu Sufyan is not yet done in the Seerah. He still has a big role to play. But here he is riding off, in the darkness, going back to Mecca. Friday night, Abu Sufyan packs up and he leaves. And the wind continues to howl and the camp continues to blow. But Hudayfa is so ecstatic. He again just sneaks out of the camp, gets away into the trench, and now he comes back to the Muslim camp. And you can imagine he's brimming with the good news, wanting to tell the Muslims that Abu Sufyan has retreated, and of course the army is going to follow him. And but he doesn't want to tell anybody else. He's going to tell the Prophet ﷺ first. And so, as you would expect, it's 2-3 o'clock in the morning, on the eve of a major battle. The Muslims have their back against the wall. What is the Nabi ﷺ busy doing? As you can imagine, Hudayfa finds him standing in the cold of the night making tahajjud. And the Prophet ﷺ is deep in his salah, begging Allah for assistance, and he has a blanket wrapped over him. So Aisha had brought the Nabi ﷺ a blanket, and the Prophet ﷺ is standing he's still, and remember, this is also on patrol. He is still manning the trench with everybody else. He's at a position, stationed. That's why he's not at home in his house. He's on the front line, and so he's obviously taken some time off to make salah. And so he's making salah, and Hudayfa sits next to him, waits for him to be finished. Hudayfa wants to tell the Nabi the good news, and what a beautiful moment and what an honor. Hudayfa says that the Prophet ﷺ opened the blanket and covered me in it. Pulled him in because Hudayfa is also cold, and so the Prophet ﷺ brings Hudayfa in the blanket, and then he finishes his tahajjud. And when he's done, Hudayfa says, Ya Rasulullah, I want to tell you that the Ahzab and Abu Sufyan, and the Prophet smiles and says, I know. Allah has informed me that basically the Ahzab have been defeated. And the next morning, Fajr comes, the Muslims make Fajr, the storm leaves, and the sun rises, and they look across the trench, and the entire camp of the Quraysh is gone. Everybody had packed up, took their tents, whatever was left, they left, and subhanAllah, without fighting, without bloodshed, of all the battles in the Seerah, this perhaps is the biggest one in terms of scale, in terms of the size of the enemy, but it's the least in terms of loss of life. And so the Muslims are really, overjoyed, couldn't believe it. And even today, when we recite the takbir, on Eid al-Adha, part of praising Allah, we say Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allah is the greatest. La ilaha illallah. There is none worthy of worship but Allah. La ilaha illallah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Walillahi alhamd. Allahu Akbar kabira. Walhamdulillah kathira. Wa subhanallah bukratan wasila. La ilaha illallah wahdahu. La ilaha illallah wahdahu. There is none worthy of worship besides Allah the One. Anjaza wa'dahu. That he anjaza wa'dahu wa nasara abdahu wa hazama al-ahzaba wahda. That he fulfilled his promise, and he supported his servant, wa hazama al-ahzab, and he defeated the ahzab wahda, all by himself. He defeated all the enemies all by himself. And so the battle of Ahzab, really, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by himself, without the Muslims even fighting. Yes, they had to dig the trench. Yes, they had to take the precautions. The Muslims did all the right things, and eventually Allah had decreed for them that they would win. And Allah Allah decreed a victory through one man, Nu'aym. And that, once again, if ever, for me, this is perhaps my favorite battle story in the whole of Seerah, because it shows you that when you look at our worldly problems today, huge problems. The Muslims are weak and scattered, divided. We don't have resources. In fact, we're not weak. We have so much strength that we're not utilizing. And we think, how can we change our situation? Muslims here in South Africa, we're a tiny percentage. Do we even have any clout or power? At the end of the day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give us victory if we are sincere and we do our effort. And that's the message. You dig the trench, take the precautions, But don't think the trench will protect you. And don't think that your numbers, whether a lot or a little, will grant you victory or defeat. But it's in the hands of Allah. And if you're truly sincere, then Allah will push us. He will push us to the brink. But if we maintain the course, Allah will bring a victory through a means which we could not have imagined. And it's not only battles, the same with your money. If you are sincere, you do what is right, Allah will open a door and grant you wealth from where you cannot have possibly imagined. And so Allah has defeated the Ahzab, the enemy, all by Himself. And so the Banu, that the Abu Sufyan and his coalition, they leave, and the Prophet ﷺ mentions that Allah had sent, and one of his weapons was that He sent a wind. And so the winds, one of the armies or the soldiers of Allah is the wind. Sometimes Allah sends a wind that is destructive, like the people of Ad. The people of Ad, Nabi Hud's people, they were destroyed completely with a wind. That it blew upon them for 7 nights and 8 days, that destroyed them completely, uprooted them and cut them down. But Allah sent to the Ahzab a softer wind. It wasn't a destructive wind, but it was uncomfortable, it was cold, and it howled, and eventually it made things so miserable that the Quraysh could not withstand it, and so they left. But no one was killed through that wind, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was merciful on them and not send an adhab upon them. And so the Muslims are overjoyed. It's Saturday morning. They returned to the masjid. It's been more than a month now. Many of them had not seen their wives and their families. And so everybody obviously must have been like an Eid, a joyous occasion. And so everybody is returning home and going back to their homes to rest and to meet up with their family. As the Prophet ﷺ is about to go home into his house and take off his armor, a man comes to him, and this man is Jibreel, and Jibreel says, "O Muhammad, we the angels have not taken our armor off. We angels are still on duty, and you should not basically take your armor off also, because the battle is not finished." Ya Allah, what remains of the battle? What is still to do? What is still left? You have to deal with the Banu Qurayza. And remember, the Banu Qurayza had initially been on the side of the Muslims. The Banu Qurayza, the last Jewish tribe in Medina, who had been the ally of the Muslims, in the middle of the battle, they flipped and joined the Ahzab. And they had become openly an enemy to the Muslims, and they in fact had sent assassins to kill the ladies of the Muslims. So the Banu Qurayza had, by all accounts, by any standard in the world, they are an enemy group, and they remained. So while the Ahzab had left, Abu Sufyan and the Ghatafan had left, the Banu Qurayza was still in Medina, and they of course could not leave. And so now the Prophet is being instructed, you cannot put your arms down, you need to go and deal with Banu Qurayza. And so the Prophet, peace be upon him, this is around Dhuhr time, and he gives a very famous statement which causes a huge controversy in Islam, and nothing to do with the battle, but it's a controversy that, not a controversy, it's actually something which we learn a lot about. The Prophet made a statement. He says, "O Sahaba, we will not perform Salah for Asr except in the suburb of Banu Qurayza." So if you imagine a town, you had suburbs, and so if Medina is town central, the center of town where the masjid is, Banu Qurayza would have been maybe a half an hour or 45-minute walk outside of where they were. The Prophet is saying, we will not make Asr except in Banu Qurayza, meaning we're not going to make Salah Asr, we're going to make Asr in Banu Qurayza. Now, as many of the Muslims had gone already home, this is news that must still circulate. And so whoever was there joined the Nabi Sallam, and they left the masjid and they went to Banu Qurayza directly. As time went on, the news spread, and people in their homes found out, hey, we have to go to Banu Qurayza. They got their goods ready, they got their armor back on, kissed the wife and kids goodbye, and now they're going on their way to Banu Qurayza. So on their way, on the road, they would have heard the command, we must make Asr at Banu Qurayza. One of these people who were quite late to get the news was Sayyidina Umar. So Sayyidina Umar and a group of companions are on the road to Banu Qurayza. It is Asr time. They keep going because they know they need to make Asr in Banu Qurayza. Now it's almost Maghrib time. So the time of Asr ends when the sun sets. When the sun hits the horizon, it is Maghrib time. And so it's almost Maghrib time. the time of Asr is almost concluded, and the Sayyidina Umar and the group are in the road still, and they said, look, we have to make Asr, we have to perform Asr. Umar's view was, we can't let the time go out, we can't let Asr conclude, and by the time we get to Banu Qurayza, it will be Maghrib. So he says, we need to stop and make Asr. Another group, so they're in a group, another party of the group said, no, how can we make Asr here? The command was, we will make Asr in Banu Qurayza. And so we will not make Asr, the exact wording is, we will not pray Asr except in Banu Qurayza. That's a very clear hadith. You will not perform Asr except in Banu Qurayza. So we were going to make Asr in Banu Qurayza. Umar says, no, this should not be understood literally. The Prophet is telling us, hurry up, we will get there for Asr time. I'll get you there Asr time. Okay? It was never meant as a command. You cannot make Asr anyway except in Banu Qurayza. The other group said, no. We heard it for our own ears. We take it literally. And so they carried on. The waqt had ended. Sayyidina Umar made Asr in its time on the road. And so he had two groups. Anyway, both groups arrive. And so they asked the Rasulullah, look, this is what happened on the road. Who was correct? Was Umar correct that your command was not to be understood literally? That it was your actual command was, hurry up, let's make Asr in Banu Qurayza? Or were you commanding us, we should not make Asr anyway, come to Banu Qurayza and then make Asr? What was your command? And the Prophet ﷺ basically said that when a judge makes a ruling, if he makes a ruling and he applies himself and he looks at the evidences and he's sincere and he makes a ruling that is incorrect, he gets one reward. Allah rewards him 1 mark, 1 point, 1 hasanat. Allah, how much is that hasanat? We don't know. It could be an entire universe of gold, but you get a reward. And if he made his ijtihad and he was sincere and he got the right answer, then he gets 2 rewards. So both is rewarded. One for it's the effort that counts, and it was the sincerity. And the Prophet says, as for what happened here, well, Sayyidina Umar was correct in that the hadith was not meant to be literal. It was, guys, hurry up and make Asr with me in Banu Qurayza. And this, of course, opens up a huge other discussion. When are the rules in Islam to be taken literal, and when are it to be taken to the letter of the law? We follow the hadith literally, and when is there some kind of principle or some kind of wisdom behind the rule that we should apply? And so the Prophet ﷺ, for example, he says 2 things which are forbidden for the men of my ummah, but permissible for the ladies: gold and silk. So men are not allowed to wear gold and silk. What's the reason behind it? Is if we say it is because it's expensive, you can't wear gold and silk because it's expensive, then diamonds are more expensive. Platinum is more expensive, then that will be even more haram. If someone says, well, it's extravagant for a man to wear gold and it's extravagant to wear silk, extravagance is haram for both men and ladies. So what is the reason? Another group says, well, we don't know, we don't care. The only thing was gold and silk, and that's it. We don't ask who or why or what. That is prescriptive, and that's it. That's just the rule. It's just the rule. Others try to look at the reasoning. And so you'd find that there are multiple reasonings. Is it the color of gold? That means anything that has gold color will be haram. Is it because it's soft? Then something softer than silk would be haram. Ultimately, and perhaps in this one mas'ala, what is the reason? The best answer is what he says, that this is for men and not for ladies and not for men. And so what we understand is that certain styles, certain materials, certain colors even maybe, certain types of clothing are specifically for ladies and not meant for men. And certain things for men are not meant for ladies. And it's just almost masculine items and feminine items. In Islam, we have this concept of not imitating the genders. There are gender specific rules. Well, most of the rules are gender neutral, but in this case it is. And so that is the argument. And that makes sense, that anything which is purely meant for a lady should not be worn by a man. And anything which is exclusively for a man should not be worn by a lady. So for example, maybe you find that Allah knows best, a turban, as the Arabs would wear with a shimagh and a iqal on their heads. You won't find a lady wearing this. It's purely for the men. Whereas the ladies wear niqab, you won't find that it is normal. It's not halal, permissible for a man to wear a niqab. And so gold and silk is one of those items which is exclusively for a lady. That's got nothing to do with the seerah. It's just trying to mention a very interesting event that occurred on which most of the madahib want to show. The point of most of the hadith is you find different madahib, different scholarly opinions. All of those opinions are meritorious. They are all good, even though they might not be right. They might all be wrong. But the effort and the sincerity of your madhab, whether you Shafi, Hanafi, whatever madhab you follow, it's all acceptable because it is based on evidence. But of course, ultimately, there is only one right answer, and Allah knows best. So anyway, so the Muslims arrive at Banu Qurayza now, and they besiege them. And the Banu Qurayza were in a fortress, and so they obviously pull their people into the fortress, and they knew. The Banu Qurayza were quite clear that they are in this situation, in this mess, because of their betrayal. And of course, the Banu Qurayza are livid with Huyay. Huyay, remember Huyay. Who is Huyay? He is the man of the Banu Nadir, the man who had orchestrated, who tried to assassinate the Nabi Sallam, who was expelled from Medina, and who now brought the whole Ahzab together, brought Abu Sufyan, and he was the one that caused the Banu Qurayza to flip. Now that things soured between Abu Sufyan and the Jews, he felt afraid to be around Abu Sufyan, and he in fact left Abu Sufyan and came to live with the Banu Qurayza. And now that the enemy, the Ahzab, had left, he's stuck in Banu Qurayza because the Muslims had surrounded them. So the whole Banu Qurayza is obviously angry at him because he's the one that had caused this mess. So now the Banu Qurayza are being besieged, and the siege continues for about 25 days. And the Banu Qurayza are speaking to the Nabi Sallam, and they said, look, what are the terms of surrender? And he said, there are no terms of surrender. You surrender unconditionally, no conditions, and then you see what we do with you. So, this is a bit of a difficult thing that is placed upon them, that you need to surrender unconditionally. The previous two Jewish tribes, when they had stepped out of line and there was a negotiation, allow us to leave, allow us to take our wealth, and the Banu Qurayza asked the same thing, allow us to leave and let us take our wealth and let us take our property and our children and everything and leave us be for 2-3 days, whatever it might be. The Prophet says, no conditions. You surrender unconditionally. So they know what this means, that their choices are. Now the Banu Qurayza themselves have a meeting, and they said, look, we only have 3 choices. We can either go out fighting and fight to the bitter end, and it will be basically a suicide mission. We fight and take out as many as we can of the Muslims, and we go out honorably, and then whatever happens to who's ever remaining behind will be taken a prisoner as a slave. Or we embrace Islam. We basically accept that this is a sign from Allah that they are the winning side, and let's just embrace Islam. If we do that, khalas, the matter is over. Or, this is a bit of a morbid one, that because we are going to die on the hands of the Muslims, let us kill our women, our children, and ourselves. We kill ourselves. Serious business. And they are still discussing what should we do. The Prophet ﷺ sends a mediator. He sends a Sahabi to go and discuss with them to surrender. Now, you must also remember the Banu Qurayza were very close with the Muslims of Medina. Before they were Muslim, they grew up together. And one of the Sahabi who was sent, his name is Abu Lubaba. Abu Lubaba would have had a friendly relationship with the Jews. He would have grown up with them. Many of them are friends of his, but of course Islam had come and he's on the side of the Muslims and they are against the Muslims. So Abu Lubaba is sent to go and negotiate with the Jews because he is someone that they know and they trust. And in fact, Abu Lubaba, when the Jews wanted to know what is the mood and how bad is the situation, he kind of made a face or emotion to show that their situation is serious, that they're in big trouble. And this, of course, would have caused them to be more reluctant to surrender. And when Abu Lubaba realized he had done this, he had basically given them an indication that or he had said to them something which had given them fear to surrender. He realized that he was actually acting against the interests of the Muslims, and so he immediately leaves and he runs to the masjid. So where's Abu Lubaba going? So now he's going to the masjid, to Masjid Nabawi, and he ties himself up and he says, I have betrayed Allah and His Rasul. Abu Lubaba is saying, I betrayed Allah and His Rasul. He obviously did this unintentionally. And I will tie myself up here and I will not leave until Allah forgives me, until Allah forgives me. Until this day in the Rawdah, in this very special place in the Masjid of Nabawi, there's a pillar called the pillar of Abu Lubaba. He tied himself up. There's a palm tree. It was a tree. It wasn't a pillar. And till today, there is now a pillar in where there was a palm tree, and it's called the pillar of Abu Lubaba. And he ties himself up, and he says, I will not leave this place until Allah forgives me. The Prophet says, had he come to me, I would have supplicated for him. But he has now put himself at the mercy of Allah, and there's nothing I can do. So this is between him and Allah, and until Allah exonerates him, forgives him, he will stay there. So now we at the stalemate. The Banu Qurayza are not surrendering because they quite fear the inevitable. There are many of the Muslims, the Muslims of Medina, who are feeling sympathetic to the Banu Qurayza. And the Aus, the tribe that is in charge, the Aus, that's the name of the tribe, the Aus were very close to Banu Qurayza. They begin to intercede with the Nabi Sallam, and they begin to say, Ya Rasulullah, go easy on them. Give Banu Qurayza a get out of jail free card. They were very, very bad. They betrayed us on the eve of the battle. In the middle of the battle, they attacked our women, but Ya Rasulullah, you are merciful. Give them a free pass. Let them leave like the other two tribes left. Don't punish them. And because the Aus are so vocal in their support of the Banu Qurayza. Also, side note, the Prophet had not said what he's going to do to them. He just said, let them surrender without any conditions. Now, but they imagining the worst. They imagine he's going to do something very harsh against them. So the Prophet says, fine, Aus, yeah, people of Medina, you are interceding on behalf of them. How about I don't make the decision? I leave the matter to you. I give them to you. You can decide what to do with the Banu Qurayza yourself. And I will let your own chief decide. Now, who is their chief? Their chief is the Sahabi we spoke about 2 days ago, Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh. Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh, who was the leader of the Aus, who had grown up with the Aus, who was the leader of the Aus, who had grown up with the Jews, was sent by the Nabi Sallam to Banu Qurayza. Go and speak to them, try to bring them back in, try to mediate with them. And in that meetings, they saw him, he saw them. It was quite, bitter. And the same Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh was injured. Remember, also he was injured. He is in the hospital recovering from a wound that he took during the attack from the Quraysh. So, understand this. The Aus of Medina are Muslims. They were friends of the Banu Qurayza. And the Aus are very sympathetic for the Banu Qurayza now. They don't want them to be punished so severely. And so the Prophet says, fine, Aus, you guys you want me to be merciful? I will let your leader, the man you love the most, your chief, Sa'ad, let him make the decision. So Sa'ad is called all the way from the hospital, and he's being carried to the Nabi Sallam. And one of the beautiful things of one of the hadith to know, that the Prophet Sallam never stood up when he never allowed people to stand up for him when he entered a room. It's the normal custom practice when the king, the president, the general, the manager, subhanAllah, anyone, supervisor walks in, everybody must jump up and get off their seat and, praise the man. The Prophet never allowed this, and he forbid this. He said, anybody who likes this for him, this is not a good thing to do. However, when Sa'ad is brought in, the Prophet says to this Aus, stand up for your chief. That's one of the interesting honors for Sa'ad. The Prophet says to the Aus, stand up for your chief. Sa'ad is on a stretcher. And so the Prophet says, he explains the situation to Sa'ad, and he says to Sa'ad, I would like you to be the adjudicator. You will decide what has happened to the Banu Qurayza. Do you accept the judgment? Do you accept to be the arbitrator? And Sa'ad says, I will accept, Ya Rasulullah, under the following conditions. He says to his own people, the Aus, are you happy? Are you satisfied for me to decide? And his whole tribe says, yes, mashallah, he's the right man. Everyone is so happy. Even the Jews of Banu Qurayza are very happy. Banu Qurayza, Sa'ad is our friend. We grew up together. He's like our brother. So we accept Sa'ad to make the decision. Ya Muhammad, we rather let Sa'ad make the decision. The Aus, yes, he's our chief, he's our man. Sa'ad, you can make the decision. And then Sa'ad says to the Nabi Sallam, even you, will you accept my judgment? SubhanAllah, he tells the Prophet, you also, Ya Rasulullah, need to accept whatever judgment I make. There's no second. And the Prophet says, of course, you are in charge, you do what you want. So now everybody is waiting for Sa'ad to make his ruling. And Sa'd, subhanAllah, he makes a very, very harsh ruling. And this is one of the areas in the Seerah which is a bit sensitive. And you find a lot of Islamophobes mention this, that Sa'd ruled that all the men who were of fighting age, all the soldiers, should be executed. Every single, basically, adult male from the Banu Qurayza should be executed, and everybody else should be enslaved. Their property, their women, their children should be taken as ransom. Now, subhanAllah, in the entire Seerah, this never happens. If Makkah will be conquered, Taif will be conquered, many groups will be conquered. This never happened. And this ruling was the most severe ruling you could possibly get. This was from Sa'd. And the Prophet says, this is the ruling of Sa'd, and he, basically agrees. Well, that's Sa'd's ruling, and I agree with Sa'd's ruling. So now, the Banu Qurayza are informed of this situation. They had surrendered, and now punishment must be dealt out according to the judgment of Sa'd. Now, a side note here: how do we as Muslims explain this? We'll talk about more of the details that occurred during this event. What must be very clear is that this was the judgment of Sa'd. And wallahi, and we cannot know for sure, but looking at Badr, looking at what happens in Makkah a few years from now, looking at all the battles, had it been the Prophet's prerogative, based on his track record, the fact that he had never done this before and never does this in the future, is that he most likely would have given a much softer, more lenient judgment. Sa'd, who was the deepest and staunchest ally of the Banu Qurayza, he gave them the hardest judgment. And this was perhaps the right judgment. And one can also argue that there is no reason, there is no question mark. The Banu Qurayza deserved to be punished. They had, betrayed the Muslims in the heart of battle. They had attacked the Muslims first. And in fact, not only the Muslims, but the women. At least the Muslims are not harming the women and the children. And anyone that is a fighter, now I want you to imagine this. Anybody who was a soldier has come to your country, invaded your country, fought your women, or tried to kill your women. If you capture them, what is the punishment you would do to this group of people? And so in their treason and this level of this treachery, the punishment is death. And so this was par for the course. It is, of course, on the harsher side. So the judge, we all know in the world, the judge can issue a sentence. He may issue a death penalty, a life sentence, might give you a softer sentence. And so the judge is in line with a number of choices. Sa'd chose the most severe choice. What's also very, very, very important, perhaps the most important thing, what happened to the Banu Qurayza was not because they were Jewish. This is not about anti-Jewish or anti-Semitism. Had the Banu Qurayza been Hindus or Christians or Arabs or other kind of Muslims, the punishment would have been exactly the same. In fact, you know that before the battle, the Muslims had been their ally, in spite of them being Jews. So it had nothing to do with their religion. And I think everybody should acknowledge that. What happened to them, what punishment was meted out against them, was because of what they had done. And so, subhanAllah, we'll talk more about the punishment of the Banu Qurayza in our next episode. Bismillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.